Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we are going to change the way you look at a tree forever. When you picture a forest, you probably imagine the leaves. You think of photosynthesis, that green magic that turns sunlight into sugar and swaps carbon dioxide for oxygen. We are taught this in grade school. The tree is a carbon vault. It is a wooden lockbox for the world's most famous greenhouse gas. This understanding is the foundation of everything from conservation efforts to carbon credit markets. But it turns out, we have been staring so hard at the leaves that we missed something massive happening right under our noses, or rather, right next to our shoulders. While we were fixated on the canopy, a second respiratory system has been working in silence on the rough, overlooked terrain of the bark. It is a discovery that was published in Nature in July 2024, and it fundamentally alters our understanding of how the Earth regulates its own temperature. It is the story of the bark filter. To understand why this matters, we have to talk about the villain of our climate story. Usually, when we talk about climate change, we talk about carbon dioxide. CO2 is the celebrity. It gets all the headlines. It is the heavy blanket we have wrapped around the Earth. But there is another gas, a cousin to carbon dioxide, that is far more volatile and far more dangerous in the short term. Methane. Methane is deceptively simple. It is just one carbon atom surrounded by 4 hydrogen atoms. It is the main component of natural gas. But if CO2 is a blanket, methane is an electric heater turned on full blast. Over a 100-year period, methane is roughly 30 times more potent at trapping heat than CO2. But if you look at a shorter time frame, say 20 years, which is the critical window we have to stop climate tipping points, methane is 80 times more powerful. It is a greenhouse gas of terrifying efficiency. For years, scientists have been tracking the global methane budget. This is essentially an accounting spreadsheet. On one side, you have sources. We know methane bubbles up from rotting vegetation in wetlands. We know it belches from the stomachs of cattle and sheep. We know it leaks from cracking permafrost and from fossil fuel extraction sites. On the other side of the spreadsheet, you have sinks. These are the places where methane is removed from the atmosphere. For decades, atmospheric chemists believed there were only 2 major sinks. The first is the sky itself, where methane reacts with chemicals and breaks down. The second is the soil. We have known for a long time that the forest floor is alive with specialized bacteria that eat methane. But here is the problem. The math never quite added up. When scientists tried to balance the global methane budget, there was often a missing sink. Methane was disappearing faster than the soil and the sky could explain. It was a mystery that baffled modelers and terrified policymakers, because if you do not know where the gas is going, you cannot predict the future climate. Enter Professor Vincent Gauci from the University of Birmingham and a massive international team of researchers. They decided to challenge the prevailing dogma. For years, trees were viewed with suspicion in the methane world. In some swampy conditions, trees act like straws, sucking methane up from the wet soil and venting it into the air. They were seen as emitters, or at best, neutral wooden pipes. But Professor Gauci and his team suspected that the bacteria known to inhabit the soil might not be bound by gravity. They hypothesized that the bark of a tree offers prime real estate for life. It is textured, it is moist, and it sits right in the wind. To test this, they did not just stay in a lab. They embarked on a global expedition to measure the breadth of the forest. They traveled to 3 distinct biomes, representing the lungs of the planet. They went to the steaming, biodiversity-rich rainforests of the Amazon and Panama. They set up instruments in the temperate oak and ash woodlands of Wytham Woods in the UK. And they trekked to the cold, coniferous boreal forests of Sweden. The methodology was incredible. To measure what a tree is doing, you cannot just hold a sensor near it, because the wind dilutes everything. The researchers had to strap customized plastic chambers to the trunks of the trees, sealing them airtight against the bark. Think of it like a doctor placing a stethoscope against a patient's chest, but this stethoscope measures gas. By injecting a known amount of air and monitoring the changes, they could see exactly what the bark was doing. What they found was a revelation. At the very base of the tree, near the soil, the sensors often picked up a small amount of emission. This was the straw effect scientists had seen before. But as they moved the sensors up the trunk, reaching a height of about 2 meters, the signal flipped. The emissions stopped. Absorption began. From eye level upwards, the trees were sucking methane out of the air. The higher they went, the clearer the pattern became. The trees were not just wooden pipes. They were giant, vertical methane scrubbers. So who is doing the scrubbing? It is not the tree itself, but a ghost crew of microscopic passengers. They are called methanotrophs. These are bacteria that have evolved a biological superpower. They can metabolize methane. In the microbial world, this is like being able to digest rocks. Breaking the bond of a methane molecule requires significant energy, but these bacteria have a special enzyme that allows them to crack the molecule open, using the carbon for food and releasing CO2 as a byproduct. But wait, does that not just trade one greenhouse gas for another? Yes, but remember the math. Methane is 80 times more potent than CO2 in the short term. By converting methane to CO2, these bacteria are effectively defusing a climate bomb. The study found that these arboreal methanotrophs are incredibly adaptive. In the tropical rainforests, where the air is warm and wet, the bacteria were working at high speed. The absorption there was the strongest. In the temperate woods of the UK, it was significant but slower. And even in the frozen boreal forests of Sweden, the bark was active. But the most revolutionary finding was the mechanism of switching. The tree acts as a two-way valve. At the bottom, it might let some soil gas escape. But as that gas rises, and as the wind blows atmospheric methane past the trunk, the bacteria intercept it. They are scrubbing the air blowing past the tree. This means they are cleaning up emissions from distant cows, leaky pipelines, and landfills. Now, you might be thinking, how much can a thin layer of slime on a tree trunk actually matter? To understand the scale, we have to stop thinking of forests as flat maps. We usually measure land in square kilometers. But a forest is a cathedral. It has height. The trunk of a giant sequoia, the limbs of an oak, the pillars of a pine, these add a vertical surface area to the planet that is difficult to comprehend. To quantify this, the research team used terrestrial laser scanning. They used LiDAR, the same laser technology used by autonomous cars, to create millimeter-perfect 3D digital twins of the trees. By scanning the forests and using algorithms to virtually unroll the bark of every branch and twig, they calculated the global surface area of tree bark. The number they arrived at is staggering. If you were to peel the bark off every tree on Earth and lay it flat, it would cover an area roughly equivalent to the entire land surface of the planet. Think about that. We have a second Earth worth of surface area, wrapped around timber, standing upright in the air. This effectively doubles the surface area available for gas exchange. Previously, we thought methane absorption was limited to the flat ground. Now we know there is a 3D filter rising hundreds of feet into the air. When the team ran the numbers, scaling up their findings to cover the global forest, they estimated that trees are absorbing between 25 and 50 million tons of methane every year. Let us put 50 million tons into perspective. That is roughly equivalent to the methane emissions from all the world's rice paddies. It is comparable to the amount absorbed by the world's soil. It is enough to offset the emissions of roughly half of the world's cattle and sheep. This is not a rounding error. This is a planetary-scale engine of atmospheric cleaning, and it solves the mystery of the missing sink. The implications of this are profound. When we calculate the value of a forest, we typically measure the biomass, the carbon stored in the wood. Based on this new data, the researchers estimate that the methane scrubbing effect increases the overall climate benefit of trees by about 10%. In a world where we are fighting for every fraction of a degree of cooling, a 10% bonus on our greatest natural ally is a massive win. It suggests that every deforestation event is 10% more damaging than we thought, and every reforestation project is 10% more effective. However, the study also highlights a crucial disparity. Not all forests are equal. The tropical rainforests are the heavy lifters of the bark filter. The combination of heat, humidity, and massive surface area creates a Goldilocks zone for these bacteria. This adds a new layer of urgency to saving the Amazon and the Congo basin. We already knew they were the lungs of the earth. Now we know they are the kidneys too, filtering out the toxins. When we burn the Amazon to make room for cattle, we are committing a double tragedy. We are releasing carbon, yes, but we are also destroying the very machinery that cleans up the methane produced by the cattle that replace the forest. This discovery also forces us to rethink how we plant new forests. Currently, forestry is often driven by timber value. We plant monocultures of fast-growing pine or eucalyptus. But the research hints that biodiversity matters. A natural forest, with a mix of species and bark textures, likely supports a more robust community of methane-eating microbes than a sterile plantation. Old-growth trees, with their craggy, deep-grooved bark, offer more surface area and shelter for bacteria than the smooth bark of a sapling. This gives scientific weight to the argument for proforestation, which means protecting and letting existing forests grow old, rather than just planting new ones. A 200-year-old tree is a skyscraper of microbial habitat. Cutting it down and replacing it with 10 saplings is not an even trade. This discovery is just the beginning. The paper published in Nature is a milestone, but researchers are already asking what comes next. Can we enhance this process? Can we inoculate young forests with supermethanotrophs? What about the leaves? The current study focused on the trunks, but if these bacteria exist on the leaves, the surface area calculation would explode exponentially. The filter might be 10 times larger than we currently estimate. But beyond the chemistry and the math, there is a philosophical beauty to this. It reminds us of the profound interconnectedness of life. We tend to categorize things, A cow is a source. A car is a source. A tree is a sink. But nature is fluid. The methane burped by a cow drifts on the wind and is caught by a bacterium on a tree, which turns it into CO2, which is then sucked in by a leaf to become wood. The waste of the animal becomes the food of the microbe, which becomes the body of the tree. It challenges our technological arrogance. We spend billions designing direct air capture machines to suck greenhouse gases out of the sky. Meanwhile, nature has already deployed billions of them. They are self-repairing, solar-powered, and they look great. They are called trees. So the next time you walk in the woods, look at the bark. It is not just dead armor. It is a bustling metropolis. It is a biological factory working silently, day and night, to scrub the air we breathe. We have always known we needed trees to survive. We just did not realize how much help they were actually giving us. Thanks for listening to G Fun Facts Online. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden world of the forest, make sure to like and subscribe for more science that changes your perspective.